So today's debate's the final debate. Let's hit a few points, talk about a few things, make some comparisons, and let's see what happened. Let's mediate.
We're about to go into a dark winter, and he has no clear plan, and there's no prospect that there's going to be a vaccine available for the majority of the American people before the middle of next year.
When I closed and banned China from coming in heavily infected, and then ultimately Europe, but China was in January. Months later, he was saying I was xenophobic. I did it too soon. Now he's saying, oh, I should have, moved quicker. But he didn't move quicker. He was months behind me.
So here they are, and they're talking about the coronavirus and what's going on with it and what their plan is. So Biden claims there's no plan, so on and so forth. Now, I think, and I think this was discussed by a few other people, in terms of a plan, Biden is approaching this in terms of, how are we attacking the virus? Trump's looking at it as a whole, as a country. How are we addressing this? How are we going to make sure that our country doesn't fall apart because of this virus? And so that's the difference, I think. One is it's a virus. You're not going to stop it. To be honest, you're just not. It's going to continue until it does what it's going to do. And then finally, we'll see what happens. I agree with Trump on this one. I think it's time to open up the economy. And essentially, we really are seeing that. It's a small percentage of people who actually die from this. The numbers, yes, the cases are increasing and they're increasing and increasing. But even though they're increasing, the death rate is not the death count, the death rate. It's pretty stable, pretty much worldwide for the most part. There are some countries where it did skyrocket, but at the same time, we knew very little about it. We know much more now. Something to keep in mind there, and interesting conversation between the two, whether there's a plan, there isn't a plan. I think it's just a different plan. That's the issue. I don't quite see what Biden would say other than he just says pretty much there is no plan on this side. I would do it differently. That's all I pretty much see.
Soon I say we're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does. He has the ability to lock himself up. I don't know. He's obviously made a lot of money someplace.
He says that we're learning to live with it. People are learning to die with it.
When I closed, he said I shouldn't have closed. And that went on for months. Nancy Pelosi said the same thing. She was dancing on the streets in Chinatown in San Francisco. I think he called me racist even, and because I was closing it to China. Now he says I should have closed it earlier. Joe, it doesn't work.
I didn't say either of those things.
You certainly did.
I talked about his xenophobia in a different context. It wasn't about closing the border to Chinese coming to the United States. What I would say is I'm going to shut down the virus, not the country. It's his ineptitude that caused the country to have to shut down in large part. Why businesses have gone under, why schools are closed, why so many people have lost their living, and why they're concerned. Those other concerns are real.
But you haven't ruled out more shutdowns.
Well, no, I'm not shutting down the neighborhood, but there are, look, you need standards. The standard is if you have a reproduction rate in a community that's above a certain level, everybody says, slow up, more social distancing, do not open bars and do not open gymnasiums. Do not open until you get this under control, under more control.
More control. That's one of the concerns that we have, more control. We've lost so much already in terms of control and in terms of well-being, in terms of economy. I mean, it's just a fact. And so here Joe is, essentially saying that he doesn't want to commit to whether or not he wants to close down or would close down. He has said he would, based on what he's told, based on the science. Okay, we can give him that. We do want to go by science. But at the same time, we've been closed. We're approaching like 3/4 of a year pretty soon. We can't sustain this for long. And so we've seen in the past where it doesn't take much for our economy to completely almost or completely collapse. And so it's something really concerning that we really need to address. Trump is pretty much on the other end in terms of he wants to reopen because he knows, he's a businessman. He understands how money works. He wants to reopen so that we don't collapse as a society. And we talked about this in the other episode, but there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of stuff's happening. And that restructuring that's being talked about right now because of COVID, that thing is real. And there are some people that really are working on that. The World Economic Forum is really, really excited about this time because this is an opportunity for them to restructure everything coming out of this. So let's move on.
But I want to open the schools. We have to open our country. We're not going to have a country. You can't do this. We can't keep this country closed. This is a massive country with a massive economy. People are losing their jobs. They're committing suicide. There's depression, alcohol, drugs at a level that nobody's ever seen before. If you go and look at what's happened to New York, it's a ghost town. It's a ghost town. And when you talk about plexiglass, these are restaurants that are dying. These are businesses with no money. And it's not the answer. I mean, you're going to sit there in a cubicle wrapped around with plastic.
So one of the comments that was talked about was Biden saying that he would essentially not shut down the economy unless he had to, right? And so it says Biden says he would be open to shutting down the economy down to halt the spread of COVID-19. This is back on August 23rd, not too long ago. And this is from Market Watch. And so it says Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden said he would shut down the economy to stop the spread of coronavirus if that was the course of action scientists recommended to him. And so that's what they're recommending right now. We're just a couple of weeks away from the election, and they're recommending that right now. They're saying, it's spreading. The count is going up. The amount of cases is going up, so on and so forth. And they're looking at, why aren't we shutting down again? We really can't. I think at this point, if we shut down again for several months, we're looking at just incredible economic fallout, even though it's already coming. We're having that. But can you just imagine? And how would we recover? It almost seems like, again, not wanting to get conspiratorial, but it almost seems like they want this economy to drop completely. And what we covered before, again, that kind of goes hand in hand. But that's just one example. But there's several. And so Wall Street Journal says Joe Biden is the shutdown candidate. I mean, that's what they're reporting. AP said Biden says he'd shut down the economy if scientists recommended it. So there's no doubt that Biden would shut it down. They're all the different agencies are reporting the same thing. He would shut it down. That's not even a question. The question is whether or not he would do it on his own, based on scientific recommendations. That's what he's saying. Trump is saying, we've shut this down already. It's not working. We need to move on. And the fact that he and his family have recovered from COVID, I think really speaks to what he's saying. And I think that's partially why, for him, he was calling it a blessing. Well, because he can actually speak to it. And he's recovered. His wife is recovering. I think she still has somewhat of a cough. And his son actually caught it as well and recovered. So again, do we have the same level of treatment? No. Should we? Yes. And that's one thing that as voters, we should consider and put some pressure on him as to why we don't. And those treatments we really should have access to. And so the other thing that came up, I'm just going to briefly touch on this. I don't want to spend too much time on it. We've been covering it here and there, but there's more information coming out daily, I think. And so it says the FBI is investigating whether purported Hunter Biden Burisma emails were part of the foreign intelligence operation. The FBI director has come out and said this isn't a Russian thing. This is not having to do anything with Russia. I think there is some validity to this. I mean, the timing, obviously, it has to do with the election. But that being said, this has to be looked into, and there's some strong evidence saying that it very likely is probable that this is the case. His family, if you look at the track record in terms of the money that came in, so on and so forth, there's a pattern. And again, it's something to definitely consider when you have Joe coming back in and how he took advantage of his position before. Really got to look at that. I don't want to spend any more time on it. Just keep your eye out. FBI saying it's legit in terms of it's not a foreign thing. It's not coming from Russia. That there's some validity to it in terms of the documentation that was brought in terms of the laptop that was collected, but they're not stating that this is an actual fact yet. They're investigating it.
Joe got $3.5 million from Russia, and it came through Putin because he was very friendly with the former mayor of Moscow, and it was the mayor of Moscow's wife. And you got $3.5 million. Your family got $3.5 million.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. What I'd make China do is play by the international rules. What I'm going to do is pass Obamacare with a public option. Become Bidencare. The public option is an option that says that if you, in fact, do not have the wherewithal if you qualify for Medicaid and you do not have the wherewithal in your state to get Medicaid, you automatically are enrolled, providing competition for insurance companies. That's what's going to happen.
And by the way, so far, I respect very much the way you're handling this. Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to approve anything because she'd love to have some victories on a date called November 3rd. Nancy Pelosi does not want to approve it. We are ready, willing, and able to do something. Don't forget, we've already approved 3 plans, and it's gone through, including the Democrats, in all fairness. This one she doesn't want. It's near the election because she thinks it helps her politically. I think it hurts her. Success is going to bring us together. We are on the road to success, but I'm cutting taxes, and he wants to raise everybody's taxes, and he wants to put new regulations on everything. He will kill it. If he gets in, you will have a depression, the likes of which you've never seen. Your 401ks will go to hell, and it'll be a very, very sad day for for this country.
We're going to choose hope over fear. We're going to choose to move forward because we have enormous opportunities to make things better. We can grow this economy. We can deal with the systemic racism. And at the same time, we can make sure that our economy is being run and moved and motivated by clean energy. As I said at the beginning, what is on the ballot here is the character of this country: decency, honor, respect, treating people with dignity, making sure that everyone has an even chance.
So in a nutshell, I'm going to run through some of these just to give you guys a small taste of it. I don't want to run through the whole thing. It takes a while to go through all of it. So they touched on Obamacare. And the thing about Obamacare, it's almost out, right? So the individual mandate, they pretty much got it out. Only 4 states, I believe, have it. California is one of them, unfortunately. This mandate, I've known people who were required to pay for this mandate. The issue with it is, even though it's affordable healthcare, right? These people were struggling to pay for it. It was something that wasn't quite attainable. And when you force somebody to pay for this, when they can't afford it, and you make them pay for it, the whole point was that they couldn't afford healthcare to begin with. And now they have a monthly premium they have to pay to get healthcare. It doesn't make sense. So I'm not saying this should be free. I'm saying even with what they provided and mandated a person to pay, that wasn't enough. I'm not sure what kind of a plan would work. I'm not working on this right now. If I sat down and worked on it, I could maybe come up with something. But what I am saying is what was provided, Obamacare, was a disaster. It really didn't work. So you force people to pay. Thank God that they actually took that and got rid of the individual mandate in the majority of the country. And what they do have didn't work anyway. And so that's on the way out too. So I'm hoping that they do come up with another plan. Trump hasn't been totally clear in terms of what that plan looks like, but it should be better than what we have. I hope it is. So the next thing that they talked about, and so Biden talked about, a public option, so on and so forth. Trump is saying that's a socialist plan. Well, I don't know. We'll have to take a look at that. I don't have all the facts on his public option. If it's anything like Obamacare, I really don't. They touched on that New York is a ghost town. I looked up some articles, and there's been some throughout the months, July, so on and so forth, that New York really is dead. Businesses are moving out. The millionaires are moving out, and the people are stuck indoors, and there's not much going on based on what I saw in the articles. I haven't been there, just basing it on that. He talked about minimum wage, $15 minimum wage. Trump says it should be based on state by state, because each state does have a different standard of living, cost of living, better yet. And so each state should base it on that. Individual state, I think it is different. It's different if you live in California versus if you live in South Dakota, or if you live in, all these other states. When you give that liberty to the states, I think that's a plus. I don't know that everybody can afford $15 minimum wage, or that I can't say they don't need it. We can all use more money, right? But it's definitely something to look at. When you do a blanket statement across the board and you force everybody to follow the same thing, typically that's not a good idea. So it's something to look at. And Biden says, 15 all the way across. So we'll see. They argued about the cages. Okay, so they had the cages in terms of immigrants who were being caught, put into cages. And Trump brought up that process began with the Obama administration. They were putting immigrants into cages as they were being held. Part of that they discussed was also the catch and release program, which also started with them apparently. There's some articles out there that I looked at, and some of them, the few articles are saying that actually started before Obama, back in the 80s, and he's saying that it started with Obama. Biden didn't negate that, but at the same time, I don't quite, if somebody's caught for whatever reason, whether you're, caught stealing or whatever, and I'm not talking about immigrants, just in general, catching them and releasing them is probably not a good idea, and I don't think they'll come back for the most part. At least if you're doing something illegal for the most part, you're probably not going to come back to get punished. I'm just guessing. That's just my guess. He talked about DACA. I didn't follow that too much. Of course, Biden is for DACA. Trump is. I don't want to say he's against. He didn't make that statement, but that's pretty much the idea behind that. Criminal justice reform. So Trump has brought on criminal justice reform. Biden says he will, or did, or he wanted to. He did make the statement that he regrets, and it was a mistake to pass the Joe Biden crime bill back in 1994. I mean, could just be a statement. I mean, he's running for office, right? It was a mistake, and now he's essentially saying he should have done what he's trying to do now, which is essentially, if somebody does something that puts them in that position, that they should receive treatment or help, which should always be part of that process, right? If you're doing something wrong, as a Christian, that's what we do, right? We all understand that we're all sinners. We all have done things that we shouldn't have. And then there's redemption. That's part of it. So part of going to jail, doing something wrong, there should be consequence, should be something that happens, some kind of punishment, perhaps you want to call it that. But there should be redemption. There should be an option for you to be able to rectify yourself and be able to correct that, with help. Again, going through a Christian perspective, that's the idea, right? You're caught in sin. You essentially do something you shouldn't. You repent, and you pretty much are forgiven, and then you do it no more. It's a basic concept. It's a biblical concept. I like that concept. The Joe Biden crime bill, essentially, if you look at some of those videos, and I've posted some of them on here, some clips. I mean, he was savage. I mean, he was just hitting them, saying they should go to prison forever. They should just die. They should rot. They should do this. I don't know. It's hard to go from Joe Biden back in the 1980s to Joe Biden, or 94. I'm sorry, Joe Biden then, Joe Biden now. Two different people. We do learn from our mistakes, but at the same time, Joe says different things. I know they brought up the fracking issue, and the fracking issue, it does flip flop, right? We have several videos where he says, yes, I'm for fracking. No, I'm not for fracking. Yes, I'm going to get rid of this industry. No, I'm not going to. And so it's essentially whatever is, depending on who he's talking to, that's what comes out. I don't appreciate that much. So at one point, they talked about honor and telling the truth. I believe it was Biden who said that. You should base it on our character. Trump calls him an innocent baby because he comes out and says things like, like we're all about honor, we're all about truth, we're all about this. And Joe, I think that's part of the issue, is that he's said and done so many things that it's hard to believe that he's all about honor. The things that he's done and said in the past aren't very honorary. And, again, we've talked about this, his record, his academic record, what he stated way back when. Even currently, he's talking about fracking yes, fracking no. Yes, we learn, but there's some things where either you believe it or you don't. That's just the truth. And so, I mean, there's even some video of him literally using the N-word, using this, using that. That doesn't tell me it's somebody who, and again, you can argue those were the times. Those were also changing times, right? So if it was in the 70s, those times were changing. And either you were on the side of, let's move with this. I get it. In the past, let's say 1960, for example, before civil rights, before that issue, before the Civil Rights Act, maybe back then you could make the argument, but post civil rights, post that period, if you didn't change your position by then, that's just kind of your character, my opinion. BLM was brought up. It said a symbol of hate. I am the least racist person in the room, is what Trump said. I thought that was funny. Do I think Trump is racist? I don't think he's racist. I think he is. He does have some prejudices. Do I think Joe's racist? I think at this point he's not racist anymore. I say that because there's evidence that he was. Does he still have prejudices? I believe so. I mean, he's still spotting out things, poor kids are just as smart as white kids. It's just things like that, where there's some lingering effect of whatever you thought at some point, and Trump, I'm sure at some point he probably had his own. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I haven't really found too much. I mean, there is that, they brought up the, the Central Park 5 or something like that. At that point, there's some argument that, he was being racist. Don't know, but there's a record here. I mean, look it up. Maybe we'll do a video on that. I do want to do some videos comparing the two guys. Based on the video evidence that we have on some of these situations and positions. So Joe calls the Proud Boys poor boys. I think Joe, he has moments. He definitely has moments. I know he has some of the stuttering issue, and that did come out this evening. And but every now and then there's some anomia. There's some different things that are coming out. Sometimes he uses one word instead of another. And it was pretty evident tonight. He got to ramble on a little bit. At some point, I guess Trump thought that Biden was calling him Abraham Lincoln, or at least that Trump was referring to himself as Abraham Lincoln. He didn't, but that was just a funny exchange. So on climate change, they did talk about carbon emissions, China's filthy, Russia, so on and so forth. That's what Trump said. The Paris Accord came up, which Trump claims that cost us trillions and trillions of dollars, was not benefiting us, and other countries were not putting into it as much as we were, and so it was actually bankrupting the U.S. as opposed to everybody paying their fair share, and so he pulled us out of it. Biden claims that it's a moral obligation. We're going to reach a point of return. whether you believe in it or not, there's so much history to climate change. Back in 1922, I believe, they were saying that within, I want to say it was 12 years then, the world was essentially going to be flooded and everything was going to happen. And we're still here. And then there are the Al Gore predictions, and it's just been going and going and going. Should we take care of our environment? Of course. It's our home. It's where we live. If you have a house, if you live in a place, take care of it. Clean it up. Don't dirty it. I mean, that's just common sense. I think this whole climate thing is kind of just common sense in terms of it. Now, you may make the argument, well, that means getting rid of all oil industry, all this stuff. I don't know if that's a solution either. When it comes to, the claim is always, we get more jobs if we go green. Yes, we'll get some jobs. We'll lose jobs at the same time, though, because all the other industries that will be lost because of it or through it will also be affected. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. I mean, are you gaining jobs? Are you losing jobs? You're actually doing both. So is that a solution to the job loss problem? I don't think so. But will it help? It will. I think it should be transitional, slowly, not from where we go, okay, by 2035, this needs to happen. I don't think that's good logic. I think it should be something that should be moved closer to, and we should think of always a better ways to do things. Now, I haven't fact-checked this, but Trump says AOC plus 3 created the Biden's climate plan. Biden said it wasn't the Green New Deal. Biden's website calls it Biden's Green New Deal. There's a Green New Deal. It does coincide with a lot of what AOC and Bernie Sanders were saying. So, yes, it is. And according to Trump, essentially it's $100 trillion and small windows. That's what we're going to get. So it sounds kind of communist, but I don't know. I have to look at that because I haven't looked at that particular thing. That was Trump's case. But ultimately, it does look like what Bernie Sanders wanted, and that was kind of part of that plan, part of that deal. I think there's a reason why Bernie Sanders backed Biden. I think they agreed on some things and finally said, okay, if you do this, it was kind of a quid pro quo, right? They call him quid pro quo Joe. He did, you do this and I'll back you up. Because at first, Bernie wasn't backing him up. And suddenly Bernie said, okay, I'm going to back you up, even though Bernie says, well, he's not a socialist. Well, maybe he's not entirely a socialist, but I think part of his platform, he did end up taking on some of those thoughts and ideas. So fracking came up a couple times, and we've gone through some of those videos. And yes, Joe did say he would oppose fracking. Yes, Joe said he would not get rid of fracking. Yes, he said both. He said them multiple times. And here he said, I never said I opposed fracking. Then he said, I will capture the emissions from the fracking and gas. It's a transition. So I will capture the emissions from the fracking and gas. What? So does that mean you're going to continue fracking and then you're going to capture those emissions to somehow make it greener, and then slowly get rid of fracking? I'm not clear. I think Joe's not clear. I don't think he's clear on what. Well, let me take that back. I think he has this plan. I just think he can't come out and say it because he'll lose votes. I think that's the issue. So what do you guys think? How were those debates? They were much better than the last time. Much better. I was happy with this. It was a good response. I think both sides came out. I would say strong in terms of when you compare it to the last debate where it really went nowhere. We actually got some responses. Actually got something that we can work with. Something we can say, okay, I'll back this guy up, or I'll back this guy up, or I will not back this guy up because of this or that reason. And so I think we're getting closer. We got 2 weeks. It's down to the nitty gritty. It's going to get crazier and crazier and crazier until that day hits. And just remember, bring out your umbrellas, duck, because we have an asteroid coming soon. Nothing to worry about from what the scientists say. Thanks for coming out, guys. Remember to subscribe, like, always share, because this stuff is important. It affects all of our lives, and we're here to just give you truth and give you guys, some direction in terms of, which way to go, how to decide, and keep you on the up and up. So thanks for stopping by.